So I guess I should officially call together the meeting of the Ad Hoc Transition Committee Planning meeting of the Commission on Police Practices. And instead of the roll call, I'll just read off who is on the screen. We have myself, who is the chair of the committee, Brandon Hilpert, who is the chair of the commission. We have Joe Craver, Marty Workman, Nancy Vaughn, Diana Dent, our liaison with the San Diegans for Justice, Kate Yevendetti, who is eating lunch, and Andrea St. Julian, also with San Diegans for Justice, and our executive director, Charmaine Mosley. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Did we receive any public comment?
No public comment received.
Okay, and then we'll have updates. There's not a whole lot since last week, but we're keeping this on the agenda just to keep us focused. The implementation ordinance has been referred to the city attorney's office to begin drafting. I don't know whether they're going to have, thank you, something to bring back to us at the March 10th, I believe it is, meeting of PSNLN. Maybe we should follow up to see what's going to be on that agenda. I'll make a note to do that. Hold on just a second here. Oh, and that reminds me too, we should get somebody to take notes for this meeting. Nancy, how would you like to do that?
Sure.
Thank you. And so I'll follow up to see what's going to be on the agenda for the March 10th PSNLN. The interim and permanent standard operating procedures, the POA had a deadline of today to express any concerns regarding the interim standard operating procedures. And so I assume that we'll hear from Joan regarding that. Is that correct, Charmaine?
Yes, you are correct.
Okay, and I doubt that we'll hear until the close of business today, but we'll see. The appointment of the interim executive director requires that the city create a department first. Charmaine, do you know the status of that?
No, I do not.
Okay. And I don't know whether that needs to go to PSNLN or whether that the creation of the department goes directly to the council. Maybe we can find out from Joan, because I think Joan is writing the ordinance to create the department.
Okay.
The budget process, Charmaine sent an email yesterday regarding some council action on Monday, but basically it's an action not to take any action until they get federal money. Is that correct?
Yes, there's a resolution that's going to be passed on Monday. I believe the council meeting is going to be at 1 p.m.
Yeah, which is consistent with what we were told when we met with the mayor's office. And so we're kind of in a holding pattern right there. And then the standing rules, I have not had a chance to work on the first draft of the standing rules for case review and report writing, but that's on my list of things to do. Anything else in terms of updates?
Did I send you my updates for the special rules of order, Doug?
Yeah, I was gonna.
That we
yeah,
have?
Yeah, that's the rules committee thing. That's not. So I'll put that on the next rules committee meeting. And then so unfinished business is the investigation process, and this request from Joan Dawson through Charmaine, wanting to know how we define and the scope of investigations, what the investigation process is, and so forth. I don't know for certain, but I'm guessing, since the question came shortly after the PSNLN meeting, it's in response to the action that the PSNLN took, and they specifically asked the city attorney's office in drafting implementation ordinance to define 6 terms: review, evaluate, investigate, investigatory proceedings, and police misconduct and police officer misconduct, all of which are referred to in the ordinance. And so with regard to that, we were going to do a couple of things today. We invited, I don't see Kevin here yet. Kevin was going to contact several review commissions or agencies across the country to learn more about their investigation process, how they interact with the police department, how they decide what to investigate. If they investigate complaints different than officer involved shootings, etc. He did send, and I think everybody got the rules and regulations from CLERB, which I found very interesting, and may provide some assistance to us. In particular, there's a section on scope of investigation, which kind of defines what an investigation is. And the CLERB has what they refer to as an investigative hearing. And I'm not sure whether that's similar to what we're anticipating. We can talk about that. And I may have Andrea weigh in on that, since she's the one who used that term in writing the ordinance. Nancy was going to check with NACOL to see what they might have in terms of written materials on the definition of investigation and the investigation process, etc.
I failed miserably.
Okay. And then Patrick was going to come and give us a proposal for a community forum, which he can't be here today, but he did email us a recommendation on that, and I'll read that when we get to that. And so since we have Andrea here, and she is the author of the charter amendment, let me ask you a very broad question, Andrea, and then you can respond as you see fit. How would you define investigation, and how would you define investigatory proceeding?
So let's see, I do have a definition. To give you a little background, you'd be surprised at how few oversight boards and commissions actually define investigation. Very few actually define it. So I have written a definition that may be a starting point. Let's see, I can, if you would like me to, can you share screen? Can you do a share screen with me?
I think Charmaine has to make you a co-host. If you could make her a co-host, you can share the screen. Or give her to share the screen, whatever it requires.
So, because it's a mouthful, it's certainly a mouthful, right? Let's see, let me go into my Zoom. For some reason, I'm having a hard time getting back into, there we go. Okay, so have you been able to, can I share the screen now? Okay, so let me find where I have this here. All righty, so can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. So it is a rather specific definition. And I let me just kind of bold the things that are really set this apart or make it truly different from what you're doing. So I have an investigation is a formal, systematic, and detailed inquiry into allegations regarding the actions of a San Diego City police officer or the actions, procedures, policies, or practices of the San Diego City Police Department through the comprehensive gathering of information from original sources, coupled with the analysis of that information for the purpose of establishing relevant facts, making findings, and formulating recommendations. Now that's a really long sentence, but I just want to point out to you what makes us different from a review or an evaluation, right? First, the inquiry is detailed. And that's a little different, but not much different, because when you do a review, you're very detailed in what you do. You really put a lot of effort into your reviews. A little more different is a comprehensive gathering of information. Before, in doing a review, you were limited to just reviewing the information that you got from IA. But what really makes, what is the true core of the definition of investigation that you're going to want to use is that you will get your information from original sources. What you do in a review is you get information secondhand from the IA. When you do an investigation, you are going to be gathering information from original sources. So that term, that phrase, original sources, is really key in how you're going to want to define an investigation, okay? Now, again, as I said, this is a really long sentence, so you might want to break it up a little bit. But the problem is sometimes when you break up a sentence, it loses some of what you need to get. So this is based on the purpose of what you're doing and the purpose of an investigation. This is the type of definition that I would use. Okay. So does anybody have any questions or comments about my proposed definition?
Yeah, we didn't mention it, but I think it answers some of the questions that were asked too, in terms of, is it going to include findings and recommendations? And the answer, according to this definition, is yes.
Yeah.
Let me ask another question. In the charter amendment, it says the commission has the power to conduct investigatory proceedings, and that's another word that they want to define. Have you looked at that one as well?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize that you wanted me to give a definition on that, but I would like to kind of address that, because I really understand how different the process that the commission will be using, how different that is from what the CRB did.
Oops.
And for example, there were a lot of questions about, and here, let me, do you want me to stop sharing screen, or do you want me to keep this up?
You can take it down, but can you email that to me?
Keep it up for a little bit, please.
Okay, yeah, I'll keep it up, because it is a long sentence and it takes a little bit of time to digest.
And do you mind emailing that to me? So
yeah, I will definitely email it to you. One thing that I was asked by people is, well, okay, people are concerned with IA being in our deliberative sessions, but we need to ask them questions sometimes, and, but it's a closed session. And, I'd like everybody to kind of break out of that way of thinking. You now have the ability to have hearings, right? And you can have anybody come to a hearing that you want to have them come, and they can answer, and that you can ask them any questions that you want to ask them. Okay, so the hearing process is where you can ask anybody anything. All right, it's not about being in a closed session. And in fact, one of the most important underlying principles of the new commission is an openness to the public. Now, there may be times when there should be questioning that should not be done publicly. But when you're really talking about gathering those final important pieces of information for your deliberation, that really needs to be done as part of a hearing, right? Where you are telling the complainant that the hearing and giving all of those, giving notice and having all of those protections in there. So that's part of the investigatory process. Now, I'm losing it for just a little bit. What exactly was the phrase you wanted a definition on? What was it? Investigatory proceeding?
And I'm assuming this is what Joan wants, because it has on the list of things the city council wanted a definition of was investigate and investigatory proceeding. I'm assuming that was the, why she referred that question to us. And then in the charter amendment, it says the commission has the power to conduct investigatory proceedings, subpoena witnesses, and compel their attendance and testimony, etc. And so that was the reference to investigatory proceedings that I found. And I also noticed that in reading through CLRBs that they also have a similar process. They call it an investigative hearing, which is made up of the way CLRB does it. I'm not necessarily suggesting this is the way that we would want to do it, but they have 3-person panels that conduct fact-finding hearings, and then they explain in their procedures the process for doing that. But the hearings are actually conducted by CLRB members who rotate similar to that. So I'm assuming that that's similar to what you had in mind when you used the term investigative hearing.
Yeah, I mean, when you decide that you need to have a hearing, and that's your decision, you may not feel it's appropriate to have a hearing in every single investigation that you do. And I'm not even talking about every review, but even in every single investigation you do, you may not feel that it's necessary to have a hearing. And you're going to have to think through when you think the circumstances you think you might want to have an open hearing. It may be in particularly high profile cases because you want to make sure that people are on board with what you're finding. And, as you all know, when you come out with a decision and people aren't prepared or primed for it, there can be a lot of concern about the decision. But if people have been through a hearing and they've heard some of the most relevant pieces of information and they kind of understand where things are going, they're not so ready to be so upset about the outcome, but that's something that you all will have to decide. And I say that because to decide what an investigatory proceeding looks like, you have to decide, you have to know ahead of time, what purpose do you want it to serve, right? Do you simply want to have hearings, and not just one purpose, but it can serve several purposes. One can just be getting those final pieces of information that you need before you go into deliberation, right?
Well, and interestingly, everything you just said is very similar to what CLRB does. They have a process for deciding when they need to have an investigative hearing, and what the scope of it is and what the outcome of it is. So I'm not sure if other people have the opportunity to read through CLRB, but that might it might be useful to people, because that is a different concept than what I was thinking of. And I think that I was not envisioning that the commissioners would be conducting hearings, but this is a different type of process. And it also talks in there some definitions of when they can be open to the public or when they can't, and so forth. And so I don't know, has anybody else had a chance to look at the CLRB things that Kevin sent?
Doug, I'm not sure that I'm on your email list because I didn't receive that. I didn't receive anything from Kevin.
Okay, then I will.
I get the Zoom invites, but I did not get any documents from
Okay, then I'll send that I'll send that to both you and Andrea St. Julian. Anybody
you-
else have a chance to,
Doug, can you send it to me as well? I didn't receive it.
really? Okay. So I will send it to everybody. And I think it might be going back a little bit. Let me find it here, just one second. I like Andrea's proposed definition, but I think it might be helpful to expand on it. And I saw a section in CLERBS that defines a scope of investigation, and so it kind of goes into more detail of what that might include. And theirs includes interviews, interviews with the complainant or the aggrieved person, each subject officer and witnesses or other persons likely to have information concerning the complaint, a sheriff's department and probation department employee response forms, examination of the scene of the incident, viewing and analyzing physical evidence associated with the alleged incident, and review, analysis, and presentation of other physical evidence, including videos and photographs. Now,
There was a specific reason why I did not put that in there.
Okay.
Because this is the ordinance, and it is
Okay.
it is hard to change an ordinance, right? Those details I think should more be in your bylaws or your standard operating procedures,
right.
because those are easier to change. When it lists comprehensive gathering of information, all of those things that you said come within a comprehensive gathering of information. It's just too hard to change an ordinance, and things will change over time as to what you want to require an investigation to look like. And so I would just hesitate to put those details in there. And as I said, I specifically did not put those details in the ordinance.
Okay.
But they should be they should be somewhere.
Yeah, and you know, eventually we're going to have a proposed permanent standard operating procedures that the city council is going to need to approve, and that probably will need to go through the meeting and confirm before we can hire investigators. And so I agree that we keep the ordinance as simple as possible, but and I think in our proposal we included the investigation procedures in the standard operating procedures and not in the ordinance itself, and I agree. But I did like that. I would add some things to that. And what I was going to say is that in CLERB's case, my understanding is that their investigations are totally separate from internal affairs, and they don't have access to the internal affairs files like we would have. And so I would add, you know, to that review of all files, all investigation files that the department has conducted, including the evidence like the body worn camera and so forth that are included with that, and so forth.
Agreed. I think that'd be great.
And so
You could say original sources from SDPD or other sources, something like that.
We could.
yeah, so
You know.
let me see.
I would propose, I think to Andrea's point is, let's keep it a little more simple here, because, you know, it is harder to change. And I think just saying comprehensive gathering of information, that can be multitudes of sources. I think putting a limiter on this, I think, is probably not helpful.
Yeah, but I think it's important, and correct me if I'm wrong, Andrea, that she bolded the word original sources for a reason, and that is that you don't rely on IA, you rely on the actual complainants and witness and so forth. And so I think I would probably go along with what Kate says, original sources and SDPD documentation.
Or you could just say original and secondary sources, original and secondary. You could just do that.
You know, and then we can define original and secondary and the
yeah, you can define that later.
And the standard operating procedures. And like I said, it doesn't sound like anybody else other than me, and I didn't do it until last night. The CLERB but I'd be interested in getting some feedback of others, whether or not they envision the commission doing that. I didn't realize the clerk did that, but I think it was very interesting to hear that they have 3-person teams who actually conduct hearings where they invite the officer and the complainant to appear before them, and it depends upon the scope of the hearing. But because I was kind of personally, I was kind of envisioning that we would have an investigator, then the investigator would prepare a report and we would act on the reports. And I wasn't thinking about the commission actually itself conducting hearings, but that's what the charter amendment specifies. And I think that actually makes sense. And so comments from
I have a question, I guess, for Andrea and for everybody. I mean, first of all, I think hearings are essential because I think the commission members should have the individual ability to assess credibility by seeing people actually testify instead of hearing it from even the investigators. But I wondered if there was an issue. You just said that CLRB has officers testify. I'm wondering if that is, if POBAR allows having open investigatory hearings where the police officers actually ask questions and testify. Because I remember historically, whenever we talked with the POA or other people, they were just, like really adamant about not having to testify in front of a commission. So that's
I
mean, if
I would
CLRB
bet
does it,
they
apparently it can be done, but
No, I
it
would
may be
bet they
different
don't.
between the sheriff's department and the SDPD.
and I think that when the officers testify, those may be closed hearings as opposed to open to the public. And we can clarification on that. And so we can follow up with CLRB and see what restrictions they have with regard to the POBAR. And and some of that is in this document, and so maybe everybody the document and maybe come up with some questions we can ask CLRB. But in terms of, well, let me hear from some of the other committee members.
Doug, I
what
would
are your
say
thoughts on it?
just
Go ahead,
because
Nancy.
it's in a procedure that CLRB has written doesn't mean it ever happens. So I don't think the officers do get.
Well, and that's the question to
Yeah.
ask, because they go into quite a bit of detail on their procedures as to how to conduct an investigatory hearing, how to call one, what the limits are, what the rights of officers are, except, and even if they don't use it, at least this could be something that we could use as a,
Sure.
as a basis for looking at it. But do you, but I guess the first question I had is, what is the vision that other members of this committee have with regard to what a investigative hearing would look like? And if you don't answer, I'm going to call on you. So Marty, how would you envision that the commission would conduct an investigative hearing?
Well, when the
Or proceeding is
so
the term that we use in the.
when the witness or subject officers are interviewed, they're required to answer. They don't have a Fifth Amendment type protection. Now, in this thing, do they have to answer questions?
Yeah, well, there is, I forget what it's called, and Andrea can help. They have to.
I would say police officers indeed have protections, and I don't think we have to worry about them not having sufficient protections. They have protections.
Yeah, and there is a legal term. It's a something warning, and it starts with an L, and it refers to a legal case. Oh, light barger warning. Does that make, can you define that, Andrea?
No, I cannot. I'm thinking of all of POBOR and all of but actually, Marty, let me ask you, what is the concern on that one?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't have any concerns right now, but I do know that in the admonishment, they're told that they have to answer.
Oh,
see, well,
there's,
I was going to say it's different probably for IA than it would be for the commission. So in the case of
Yeah.
IA, they are required as a condition of employment to answer, and the answers they give cannot be used against them in any criminal proceeding.
Right.
So we need to find out exactly what the limitations are, and that probably I'm assuming it has to do with their First, Fifth Amendment rights and so forth. We can find out about that, but they do. I guess the point is that they do have a process spelled out by CLRB for conducting hearings that are conducted by CLRB members that can include both the complainant and the subject officer.
and the hearing wouldn't be just about the police. I mean, the only person testifying wouldn't be the police officer who's the subject of the complaint. It could be witnesses, the complainant. You can call anybody you want to a hearing.
And the CLRB process, they do the investigation first. The investigator submits the report, and then the committee reviews the report. And after reviewing the report, they decide whether or not to accept the findings of the report or whether to conduct their own investigative hearing. And then it spells out how to do the hearing, and which I thought was very interesting, and I think is a good idea. But just that it had not occurred to me until I saw this and was looking at the terminology investigatory hearing that the commissioners would actually be conducting the hearings. And so I thought I like it. I just didn't, it wasn't part of my initial vision. Joe, what are your thoughts on how we should define an investigative proceeding?
Doug, you have gone around a lot of this. I always envisioned that we would have the ability to go ahead and interview police officers. Police officers are going to have their representative there also, as they do with their IA interview. But to be able to be effective and professional, we obviously need to go ahead and, on the cases that we need to, is to interview the individual police officers.
Okay.
So that I think is absolutely essential. And I don't know, what their crowbar says about that or what, but however, I don't. And it may not be in every case, but in some cases, I think it would be absolutely essential. So that's my take on it.
Okay. Brandon, any thoughts?
Just had to turn off mute. Yeah, no, I agree. I think we just have to find out the legal aspect of having officers come in for interviews. I've kind of always supported that if we can have subpoenas for witnesses, civilian witnesses, we should be able to have those for law enforcement as well. Otherwise, I think it's unfair. So I feel that should be applicable to both sides. I think we just have to find out what we can do. But I think you're right. I think with the IA component, it's because it's an administrative discussion with them, whereas with us, I mean, it's not administrative, it's more of an investigation. But I'm sure we can either talk to the city attorney or our outside counsel and get feedback on that. But yeah, no, I actually agree. I think her description is perfectly fine. I have no problems with it at all. Okay,
a question for Andrea. Subpoenas, would subpoenas apply just to hearings, or would they also apply to the investigator themselves? In other words, since it sounds like many, maybe most of, at least in CLRB's case, they act on the report from the investigator without having an actual hearing.
Yeah.
So does the investigator have the ability to have a subpoena for his or her investigation?
So, yeah, so the whole subpoena thing, let me address that. I hope you will never, ever, ever subpoena a police officer, okay? You should never have to subpoena a police officer, because you will hopefully, and hopefully at some point very soon, talk to the police department and set up a process for them to provide you access with a police officer. And the understanding, it can be a written understanding, that, you know, if the police department agrees to require officers to speak to us, not answer every question, because that's something different, but require them to speak with us, then you will refrain from subpoenaing them. Okay. I really, please set up that process. People hate being subpoenaed. You don't want to do that to people if you don't have to. Okay. So that process should be set up as soon as possible. Subpoenas are also for documents. And again, you shouldn't have to subpoena documents from the city or the police department.
Right.
You should, again, set up a process and say, listen, and the problem is you have to have subpoena power. Otherwise, they won't just give you the documents. Right. They just won't. Okay, so that's why I had to put it in there. So,
right.
So
yeah, but, you know, I guess I think you answered my question, and that is the investigator has the authority to do it if need be, as well as the commission itself. So they could be ordered to appear. A person could be ordered to appear before a investigator or the commission or a sub.
You know, to be honest with you, whenever I've had to subpoena someone, it's either for documents or a deposition or a hearing or a trial, right? Subpoenaing someone just to come and talk to me personally outside of the deposition, I've never seen that. Maybe Kate can answer that, because I'm not sure if you can just do that.
But wouldn't that be similar to a deposition?
It could be similar to a deposition, and you could set it up like a deposition. And you could definitely do that. Kate, go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't.
No, I was just going to say the same thing, that I think it would be similar to a deposition, but I also think really, I mean, what Andrea is saying, and I'll be a little more blunt, is that the subpoena power is really just a cudgel. It's to have in the background as basically a threat. If you don't talk to us or give us these documents, we can subpoena it, and then you will have to speak in an open hearing. That I think is what many other agencies see as the use of a subpoena power. We were told, I think, that CLRB never had to use their subpoena power. And so part of that is working out the MOU that you work out with the police department,
right?
And all that.
And we got and you're right. I've heard from several agencies in California that they've rarely have to use a subpoena power, and I forget which one is which. I think Riverside has only used it like a couple of times. I think maybe CLRB has never had to use it. And then we got it from Jason. I forget his last name. He came to one of our previous meetings from NACOL. Send us a copy of the memorandum of understanding that San Francisco uses with their police department, of how they request documents and so forth. And the CLRB procedures specify the process for scheduling a interview or testimony with a police officer. So let me do a couple of things here before we move on. Andrea, would you be willing to work on drafting a definition of investigatory proceeding? Because I'm guessing that that's part of what Joan wants, and I think it's better if we are proactive and give her something rather than have her do it on her own.
No, I agree, and of course I'll work with you on that, Dave.
Okay.
And I like your approach of starting with CLRB.
And I don't know what happened with Kevin today, but I would like for people to look at to read through the CLRB proceedings. Not that we ought to model them after that, but I think that there's a lot of the process there in terms of what a hearing looks like and so forth, I think is a good one. So I would like for people maybe to look at that, and we can talk about it next week of whether we think that's a model or whatever. And maybe by then, Kevin will have had an opportunity to have talked to some other agencies across the country and may have some different alternatives, but at least that will give us a starting point.
Doug,
Doug, sorry, I was gonna say, I had a conversation with Kevin a couple days ago, and I know he had reached out to several different agencies across the country, and he was waiting for a lot of them to get back to him. So he had told me that he wasn't gonna have a lot of details to share with us at our meeting today, but he expected by next week's meeting that he probably would have most of the various departments he's spoken to, he would have feedback from most of them. So I know he's working on it, and I know I think he only had information back from 1 or 2 of the places he's reached out to.
Okay, so go ahead, Andrea, you wanted to?
Yeah, I just want to ask one thing. Can this committee really drill down on how they want to use investigatory proceedings? Because it's really fundamental to know and understand that in order to create an appropriate definition. So if you could all have that conversation, that would be great.
Okay. We will do that. So if everybody could read the CLURB one as providing some guidance, and if Kevin's able to give us some additional ones to distribute prior to the meeting, that would be helpful as well. And then let's move on to our next item of discussion, which was last week we talked about having a community roundtable or forum to talk about the investigative process. And Patrick wasn't able to make it today, but he does have a proposal. He says, regarding the investigation process and a potential community outreach event on the topic, I haven't had a lot of time to spend working on this over the last week, but I have been thinking about it. We initially talked about having 2 separate events, one with the NACOL folks discussing investigations, the second a listening session for community members to talk back to us. But on reflection and perhaps remembering the challenges of the 4 roundtable series, I no longer think this is the best model. Instead, I think we should hold a single 2-hour event. The first hour would be focused on a guest, ideally Jason, who visited our committee meeting a couple of months ago, talking about the various kinds of investigations. Been involved in this work for 30+ years. I think he would have a good broad sense of the possible models. And then the second hour could be discussion with community members speaking about their ideas. There are 2 main reasons why I like this, why I think this is the right approach. First, there's a lot of turnover between 2 events. In other words, not everybody at an event will have attended the first one. And the second reason is timing. It seems that we need to get information to the city attorney as soon as possible, and a second event would obviously make this, and not having a single event would obviously make this easier. Can you let me know what other members of the committee think about this? And then he's asking for the contact information for Jason, which Charmaine or I can provide to him. I liked that idea better. It's a whole lot simpler. Instead of trying to get a whole panel, we can get a single person who is an expert with a lot of experience, and we can accomplish it in one roundtable instead of a series of roundtables. So thoughts of others?
I'm on board with Patrick's recommendation. I agree.
Okay, is there anybody who disagrees with that?
No, I agree.
Okay, so then I think we should move forward with that. The next question I have is timing. Of course, obviously, if we were going to invite Jason, we have to schedule around his availability. But maybe after our next meeting, because then we can maybe clarify in our mind some of issues and directions we want to go. But I think we want to do it fairly soon. So let me see. Like maybe the first or second week in March. Does that make sense to people?
Yeah, I think somebody should contact Jason if that's what you want as soon as we can to see availability and then talk about it on Friday.
Okay. And so I think we should go with it, and I will get back to Patrick and tell him that to proceed and give him the contact information. I know I have his email address. I don't know if I have his phone number or not, but probably the email address is sufficient. Okay. And then the date of our next meeting, I assume you want to meet next Friday at noon. Any problem with that? Okay. And Andrea, you're welcome to join us again, but we don't want to put you on, it's up to you. You're not a member of the committee, but and Kate serves as well, but you also have some expertise. And so you're welcome to join us if you're available. If not,
I would love to join you. However, I will have to beg off because I do have other meetings and another standing meeting every other work on Friday. So,
okay.
But
Well,
thank you so much.
Representation,
Yeah.
Representation from Kate. And I think you, if I understood you correctly, you want to hear some feedback from us before you work on the definition of an investigative proceeding. And so we will discuss that next Friday. And we'll have Kate get back to you and with a response from our committee regard to that. Okay. Then our next item on the agenda are other items and or concerns. Does anybody have any concerns or items? Okay. Then the final item on the agenda is adjourn. Is there any objection to adjourning? Then we actually got it done in less than an hour. According to my watch, we got it done.
Patrick wasn't here. He said that initially, Patrick wasn't here.
So,
Yeah, that's good. Good meeting, Doug.
okay. And so I will, everybody knows what they're supposed to do. I will get a hold of Patrick, and I also will send out the things we got from him to everybody else, and also try to find out what's going to be on the agenda for the March 10th meeting. Was anybody else given any homework assignments? I don't think so. So, okay, then we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you. This was fabulous. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good weekend.
Have a great weekend, everyone.